So if this is so great, why aren't companies doing it? As I said, measurability is kind of an issue, especially with the people side. It's really hard to determine some of the factors that go into the triple bottom line, and also there's just an information gap. Sometimes the management that's trying to collect information simply is not able to get the numbers from the people that are supposed to be providing it. There's also a large variability in reporting, even among the firms that do choose to follow the Global Reporting Initiative guidelines, which makes it kind of difficult, and some companies wonder whether consumers can really make informed decisions if they're not even looking at the same facts. There's also a lot of inertia. Just like with any organization, in order to make such a drastic change, you really have to stimulate the desire and the need and the sense of urgency in order to put this change through. There's also quite a bit of revolving doors going on. The regulators and the top executives in many companies are often one and the same, at least during some periods of their tenure, and that is preventing this regulation from being a part of our business as usual. And then there's also, again, the debate of shareholders versus stakeholder management, although we did address some of those issues. Now, I said earlier that I would talk about greenwashing. Greenwashing is when a company appears to be doing sustainable projects and investing in the community and being a good citizen and blah, 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 but really they're just doing it to look good. And what the problem with that is that with the increasing information that consumers have access to, consumers know, and they will punish companies very, very hard if they find out that they're not actually being good corporate citizens. Here's a quote from the Union Bank Senior VP Mark Stevenson. I'll give you a minute just to read that. So at the end there, of course, he says it's hard to fool customers in the long term. So I'm going to give you a few examples of how triple bottom line has been incorporated into the actual companies that we're concerned with here. Kimberly-Clark has distribution centers, has one large distribution center in South Carolina, and they realized that they were using a lot of electricity in their lift trucks. So what their energy consultant said was, hey, why don't you switch out those batteries with these hydrogen fuel cell batteries? Now, hydrogen fuel cell are extremely expensive, especially upfront, because it's a growing sort of segment in the market. There's not a lot of supply for it. So that was pretty much the number one thing that was stopping them. But the U.S. Department of Energy did offer them a pretty sizable subsidy in order to back them up on this initiative. And I want to ask, how did this affect the triple bottom line? We can think of it in many different ways. So we know that there's a substantial upfront cost, and so that might have had a negative effect on profit. And so that's one concern that we'll have to think about. As far as sustainability goes in the planet, we know that this was a better move because hydrogen fuel cells emit water as their emissions, not carbon monoxide. And for the final element, which is people, we can also take that element from planet, which says that we're now polluting less, and we can apply that to the workers who are no longer exposed to all of the hazards of the traditional batteries. Now let's look at the actual results. Kimberly-Clark saw a dramatic cut in their electricity usage, just as we thought they would. And their carbon emissions, of course, dwindled. A side effect was that neighboring distribution center, Bridgestone Tire, actually kind of got on board and pretty much did the same thing with their lift trucks. And in fact, the county itself adopted fuel cells and installed a hydrogen refueling station between the two companies. So it worked out for everyone, and it provided new resource to the community, so really helping out the people aspect again. Another example is that Cisco realized that it was taking in a lot of equipment from its customers, and it was spending about $8 million a year just to scrap all of this material. And they realized, hey, 80% of this is still in usable condition. And so what they did was they created an internal recycling business unit. They separated it out, they gave it its own profit and loss statement so they could track how well it was doing. And they routed that to be able to supply those machines and those routers and whatever else was being returned into their internal customers. So the customer service center, warranty department, the technology labs, and training. So all of these previously scrapped materials were actually being reused. Their results were that the reuse of equipment shot up from 5% to 45%. The recycling costs fell by 40%, and the reclaim and reuse business unit has actually become a profit center, whereas before it was a cost center. This contributed over $100 million to the bottom line in 2008 alone. So obviously an incredible business decision for Sysco. And it also shows that they're leading innovation, again, which is part of their proposition value to customers. So that reinforces their objectives as far as how they look to their consumers. So I'm going to go over a couple of important stages of change that have been found to be pretty relevant as far as the stages that companies go through when they're trying to incorporate the triple bottom line. A lot of the time companies don't go, I'm going to incorporate the triple bottom line right now. What they do is they start making gradual changes, and that evolves into something that is much more holistic and much more better for the company long term. The first is that companies view compliance as an opportunity. Most of the time, companies just do the least that they possibly can in order to not break the law. This mentality keeps them at sort of a minimum as far as competition goes and innovation. When companies view compliance as an opportunity, they set the most rigid standards that are emerging in consumers' eyes, maybe possible legislation that's going to be coming up, and they set those as standards to achieve. The second part is making value chains sustainable. Now, increasing your productivity and streamlining your value chain is not revolutionary at all. This is a totally common business practice that businesses are always looking to make their supply chains and their value chains just more efficient overall. It's guided by the first stage, so if a company is looking at regulations and trying to instead be ahead of the game, then they're more likely to be willing to incorporate changes into their value chain. Sysco and Kimberly-Clark are really great examples of this. The third is developing and designing sustainable products and services. Marketing research has identified a new market segment called lifestyles of health and sustainability, and it's emerging and it's growing, and it's a totally popular new trend to kind of get into. And so by implementing those first two stages, a company can start to incorporate more sustainable products into their product offering and also incorporate more sustainable inputs into their value chain. The fourth stage is developing new business models. I want to tell you about a company in California that is called Calera, and it is a cement manufacturing company. And what's special about them is that they manufacture cement by taking carbon emissions from the surrounding industries and the surrounding companies, and they bubble it through seawater, and it turns into cement. It's kind of like how corals make reefs. And so their new business model is that they're going to give away their cement for free, not as like a free trial. They're going to give away their cement for free, and they're going to charge the companies a fee for taking away their carbon emissions. So the companies already have to pay somebody to take away their waste anyway, and what this company is doing is they're seeing that profit opportunity, and they're also returning it to the community. The fifth stage is about questioning the status quo. You never have to settle for just business as usual. You always want to create those next practice platforms. We talk a lot about best practices, but we're focusing on next practices rather than just what's going on right now. So developing a working environment that fosters change and innovation is really, really important. And that is the conclusion of our triple bottom line discussion for University of Washington Beta Psi.